Hi, everybody. This is Cindy Kennedy, and you are listening to another episode of Living with Lyme. And today we are going to talk a lot about nutrition. We have Barbara Olendzki from UMass Medical Center. She actually is the Associate Professor and Director of the Center for Applied Nutrition at UMass Medical School in Worcester. And if you go to her bio on my page, you'll be able to see how to reach her platform as well as her email in case you have any questions specific for her. She is not only an instructor, she is also a researcher. She has some really cool information to give us today. And she really is into innovative ways to improve how people eat, how they become healthy. And I want to introduce to you Barbara Olendzki. How are you today?
Hi, Cindy. Thank you. I'm doing really well. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's so nice to have experts that have actually information that people can put to use right after this podcast.
I hope you're right about that. I really love it when people are changing for the better. The results can be phenomenal.
It can be, because I always say we are what we eat.
We are. And so you bring up a point. I kind of pointed out that farmers have known this for many years, that if they feed their animals in certain ways, then their animals will grow in certain ways. And for instance, chickens, they can feed the chickens ground flaxseed, which is an omega-3, it's 18 carbon omega-3 fatty acid. And then it changes the eggs that the chickens produce. So we are what we eat, but so too are the animals that we eat. And so it kind of goes up the chain that way.
It does. It does. It's amazing. You really hope that people don't take for granted what they're getting and really try to read their labels and actually research where they're getting all their fun stuff to eat. I want to hear about you. People always like to know a little bit about the people who are on the podcast so they can, make a connection. Tell us how you got into nutrition, how you got to teach at a medical school, because I have to say, in most cases, not all, medical professionals say, yeah, just go to CVS and get yourself a vitamin, or no, it doesn't really matter what calcium you take, etc. And teaching people, especially in the helping field, is so important. So tell us more about you.
My undergrad is actually in fine arts. I was a potter until my younger son was born with a number of allergies and intolerances, and he was entirely breastfed at the time. I changed my diet to help him, and it worked. Later on, young child, sort of long story short, I now have autoimmune diseases that developed when I was adolescent. In order to address those diseases, I've had to change my diet. And I didn't get any answers from the medical professionals that I saw. One can't live on prednisone all the time. And so I began to treat myself with diet. I decided this was something that was so powerful. I went back to school, got my master's, worked at a health food store, which taught me a lot about supplements in the meantime and alternative ways, because people show up in health food stores that don't show up in other places, and did my internship at UMass. I never left from that day. That was over 20 years ago now. And the people that I was fortunate enough to work with are in preventive and behavioral medicine doing research in nutrition. And at the time, it was breast cancer and heart disease. I began a clinical practice at UMass. That research has developed over the years. We're still doing research in obesity, heart disease, et cetera, et cetera. And then someone landed in my office sent by a gastroenterologist, and he requested that we do a particular diet because nothing else had worked. None of the medications had worked for this patient. And I thought, are you crazy? No one's ever going to be able to follow this, let alone have it work. And it really showed me because it worked beautifully. And the researcher in me took over, and I wanted to know, why is it working? How can we do this better? It was a diet that was developed in the 50s. Food supply has changed tremendously, as well as research has come a long way since that time. So I took what I knew about cardiovascular research and put it to use with autoimmune diseases and inflammation. And so that was born a particular diet that is called the IBD-AID, or Anti-Inflammatory Diet. I've now used it with patients of all diseases of inflammation to good effect. And partnering now with the Center for Microbiome Research at UMass. And what that is sort of looking at the good bacteria, bad bacteria. There's also yeast and a number of other things that we have. And how that balance of good guys and bad guys can affect inflammation. So what we do in our research is we have a baseline where we're looking at the microbiome of patients who have the disease prior to initiating diet. They then are coached and taught the diet, and that in and of itself is a skill, learning how to change.
So I have a question. You're talking about gut bacteria, correct?
I am. That's what we're testing. There's also skin, eyes, you name it.
Wow.
We
How
are
do you
testing
do?
gut bacteria?
What is your method for testing gut bacteria?
The patients submit stool samples.
Oh,
And
the poop.
the poop.
You want to get the scoop on the poop.
Absolutely. And my colleagues,
you can use
love
that. You can use that.
the
That's
scoop
free.
on the poop. Yeah.
Scoop on the poop. Listen, the first thing we do is we get the scoop on the poop. Then
Then we learn from it. One of the things we've learned is it's not just about one good guy. It's about the families of good guys and how the families get along. Just like our families, you know, sometimes there's some characters that you're left with that aren't really pleasant at the dinner table. And so too it is with the microbiome. And certain foods can change the microbiome even in as little as a day.
really, just a day?
Just a day.
So I always talk about the microbiome as a bunch of kids playing in the sandbox. And sometimes you have a group that get along really, really well. And then every once in a while you have a couple of bullies. And if the bullies start throwing sand, and then the good stuff starts leaving the sandbox, and then even though these kids, you know, theoretically they're nice kids, but their bully tendencies tend to wreak havoc.
That's a great analogy.
You like that? Oh, geez.
Like
You're going to have to purchase that one from me.
Oh man, we're developing a list now.
So, you know, what in our life causes this disruption?
There's several factors to it, and not all of them are food. But our food supply has changed tremendously. Anytime you're buying a food that has gone through the hands of a manufacturer, they may add things that don't even have to be on the label, but are generally recognized as safe, or GRAS list, that can act to help to keep the food smooth, or to give it a certain binding, number of things on it. There's emulsifiers added, all kinds of things. And now, years later, we're discovering that isn't such a good idea. An example of this might be margarine was thought to be the end-all be-all. And now we know that with the trans fatty acids and the hydrogenated oils, it's not safe for human consumption. We have to get rid of the trans fats. And so there are a number of things in our food supply that are out there making money, and people are happily eating them.
Why do you think
people,
why do you think when you explain this to people, why are they still hesitant to make the change?
It's really hard to make the change. It's hard to find foods that are clean. And especially if you're working 2 or 3 jobs, you've got a busy family, driving. There's so many factors. And I understand how difficult it is to find clean, good food. It's not quick. It means somebody has to go into the kitchen and maybe learn skills. They've been used to microwaving. kids are growing up learning how to microwave. They're not learning how to cook and eat at the table and work with fresh foods.
How do you feel about the Instapot?
I love the Instapot.
See? Actually, Kara, my daughter, who's a registered dietitian, and we were fortunate enough, we were able to give away an Instapot. Yes, from Pursue Wellness. And yeah, so, we want to, there's a lot of recipes. There's a lot of things out there that you can Google and whatnot. But sometimes if you're doing it on the fly, you're like, oh, I don't have this in my pantry.
Right.
So, we're hoping to put out a nice, meal plan, something that you can actually do a few times a week or even a few times a month with some leftovers. Yeah. We don't like leftovers too long.
Well, you can batch them, you can freeze them.
Perfect.
Ball jars work well. I put hot foods into the ball jar and then it seals. And it'll keep for 2 or 3 weeks or a long time in the freezer. So there are tricks to get.
So the ball jar being glass, do you have to let it cool on the counter before you pop it in the freezer?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Otherwise you'll hear.
Yeah, you don't want to pop it in there too quick. You want to wait until after it's sealed. You can actually hear it.
You can. That's amazing.
A little pop when it seals. Yeah.
Oh my. That's a good take home. If anything, it's a pearl. It's a pearl. It's beautiful. I want to talk about some of the studies that you're actually, spending time researching, because you said the researcher in you came out. And I have to say, there are some things that we do in life. We do it because it has worked for other people. But there's a lot to be said about there's proof in the pudding. So tell us your pudding. What is it that you're actually doing right now, and how are you doing it?
I am really excited about what we're doing now. It's funded by the Helmsley Foundation. It's called the Melody Trial. And it's a nationwide study. We're recruiting from all over the United States, and we are recruiting pregnant women, both healthy pregnant women and women who have Crohn's disease. And for the women with Crohn's disease, they can choose to go on the diet or not go on the diet. But if they do choose, we are intervening in the 3rd trimester. We have seen in previous research that intervening with the mom's diet in the 3rd trimester will influence the gut microbiome of the baby, and therefore they can be born with a better chance at not getting the disease, which can be genetically passed along to generations. So the babies are healthy when they're born, but what we've seen is that babies born to moms with Crohn's disease don't have as much diversity. They don't have as many numbers of the good guys as babies born to moms who don't have the disease. And so we increase the number of good guys for those babies to give them a fighting chance. And it's not only with Crohn's disease in my head, it's other diseases of inflammation.
Autoimmunity really comes from the gut. And I've seen it that, you try, everybody's like, oh, well, treat the autoimmunity, do something really quick, and then everybody who goes through mainstream medicine, they don't know that there's alternatives. And by healing the gut and making it very, very strong, then you can actually decrease your autoantibodies. And I've seen it with thyroid. I've seen it with rheumatoid. It's out there. The capability of this. I wish mainstream medicine would feel the same.
I agree with you. Many patients see their docs and they say it doesn't matter what you eat, but this is where we need to establish dietary guidelines, and the patients themselves have their stories to tell. And it's for people like you, Cindy, and having the podcast that helps to bring a light on the stories, the true stories of success going forward. So we're not so completely dependent upon pharmaceuticals that may or may not work or may have side effects. So I work within a hospital system, and I am able to complement the practices of the conventional with the alternative, so that the patient who has a lot of fear in embracing the alternative can do both. It's not an either or.
Do you find things in people's diets that are highly inflammatory, like a specific food or additive, or, I don't want to lead you, but because I just want a really clear, straight answer. So
Yeah, and it scares me to give straight answers because people might say, "Oh, I can't do that." Yes, there are certain foods that are inflammatory for the genetically sensitive people. Those foods are geographically different. So I can have a patient, for instance, have to avoid wheat in this country and do fine when they go to Italy. Okay, we're talking about people who are not celiac, but unable to tolerate wheat. I personally hypothesize it's due to the GMOs that we have in the seeds of certain plants. And so going with a GMO-free food product is probably a pretty good idea. There are also certain emulsifiers that one should avoid, and carrageenan, maltodextrin, carboxymethylcellulose, they don't roll off the tongue, and that others that can be really beneficial. So if we increase beneficial foods, that's often the approach to changing the diet. Like, okay, let's try this recipe. Let's have these oat groats, GROATS, whole oats, instead of rice tonight. And then we have a therapeutic food that's tasty, because I firmly believe and that food should taste good in order to be truly therapeutic.
right, because we don't want people adding a tremendous amount of sweetness or saltiness to try to get the food down.
Right.
Tell us, I'm almost certain, but just in case I'm not, GMO, what does that stand for?
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, give us the DL, the down low on
Down
GMO.
low. We're still learning about genetically modified organisms, and there are many, and some may be perfectly harmless. The reason why we started adding these GMOs to the crops, excuse me, is so that the farmers can have a better yield. So if the bugs don't go for the plants, they can grow more plants. But now we've discovered, and glyphosate or Roundup is one of the things that's been tied into the incidence of cancer now, produced by Monsanto. And they have a great, someone just earned a lot of money by the court case. So what happens is our bugs don't go for it either. And all of a sudden we have the die-off of the beneficial bacteria that are supposed to be there to protect us. So it's not only the bacteria themselves, it's the substances that they produce that key into inflammation in the body and shut it down. And that's where we can have a similar effect to some of the drugs, but without the side effects.
I'm thinking about that. We have to remember the meat that we eat, the eggs that we eat. If the farmers are feeding them corn, we are, even though we're truly avoiding GMOs, we're going to be ingesting that via their meat or their eggs, right?
Oh, Cindy, you've brought up a really good point, and I don't want to scare people but it is scary. The farmers are going to try and bring that animal to market as cheaply as possible. A lot of the pork is GMO too. It's strange, and I don't understand all the basic science because I concentrate on other things. But yes, we are what we eat, and so too are the animals. And so going with the more expensive organic or grass-fed or free range is a better idea and much safer, especially if you're struggling with a disease that's impacting your quality of life. There comes a certain point where it's really true. Health is the most important thing.
Right. And it's frightening because people, I once heard my husband talking with someone about feeding their family. And of course, cost is certainly an issue, and where are you going to spend your money, and will you be able to afford, taking your kids to the movies over the weekend, because that's what's important to them, not what they're eating. They just want it to taste good. And she said that, look, I can take my kids and get them hamburgers at a local fast food restaurant, and it might cost me $5 or $8, but I can get like 3 apples or 4 apples for the same price. And that's not going to fill their tummies. And so they look at it, risk benefit. I might as well feed my kids so that their stomachs feel full, so that they are getting, the ability to sleep that night, rather than just buying, 4 apples or whatnot that are organic.
It is a struggle for somebody who's on a budget. There's no doubt about it. And this is where the environment is not necessarily conducive to making it easy on people. What we do recommend is a more home cooking, and that can be just as cheap as going to the fast food restaurants, where when you have something like the whole oats or barley, and then you can throw the beans over, you can do frozen vegetables, to go with that. You can end up with a budget that's doable, but it's learning how to do that. We do have some resources available, and Cindy, I know you and your daughter are working on a number of projects that could be helpful to folks.
Right. And they can reach out to us at www.pursue, P-U-R-S-U-E, wellness.us. Kara is my daughter and the registered dietitian. She can formulate some plans for you to not only have that, and of course it's forever. You get a recipe, you're going to keep it forever, but to explain how to go to the grocery store, what to look for, not only that grocery list, but how to prepare ahead. Because if you take some extra time, I always tell people, if you've got some extra time on a Sunday, start making a list, start preparing for the week, because really your plans, if you lay them out, it's doable. But you have to plan ahead. One of my other daughters, Kayla, every week she sits down and she plans her list and she does it accordingly. Now, some people who are really on a budget, what I've seen them do, which I think is fabulous, is they get their local circulars for wherever their food sources are, whether it's the grocery store or a market or whatnot, and they see what's on sale. And they either buy that, maybe another bulk, you buy 2 of it instead of 1 because it's on sale, etc. And then they plan their meals for the week around that. Is that a great idea?
Planning ahead is absolutely key. You
Yeah.
find something that you like, you find the places that you can get it. Even Whole Foods or Whole Paycheck will have sales on certain items that, can be better than what you find in the grocery store, and better quality. So you look for the quality. The place that this comes from is the heart and the mind, where one decides that they don't want to live this way anymore. It's not worth it. And the way that they feel when they are consuming healthy food, getting some exercise, and have support of their family, it's irreplaceable. Once you're doing it and you learn how to do it, it's actually better. And people are compliant to the diet, not because they like it. It's pleasurable and it makes them feel good. And why not?
You brought up a good point. Your family. What do you say to someone that says, my kids are so fussy, they'll only eat chicken nuggets and peanut butter, and my husband won't consume a vegetable even if it bites him? What do you say?
Okay, so I assume now what we've got is the mom is our patient, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm always with women, so.
Yes, and mom's got some disease of inflammation, and she's so tired. Fatigue is really a challenge when you've got so much going on and you want to go with something easy for the kids, and the kids can have such a powerful voice. So she's reached a point to say, I really need to do something, and she's not going to be there for her family unless she's there for herself. if she gives it all away. And so sometimes what we do is the mom actually may be saying, hey guys, this is what I got to do for me in order to be there. You don't have to do it. So I say, okay, you don't have to do it, but this is what we've got. Maybe she cooks 2 meals. I kind of recommend we put 1 meal on the table, and it's the healthy one. They don't have to eat it. But after a while, it's such tasty food. If they just try it, they might be surprised. And so love of each other, what we do for each other, what the husband might do is join his wife in achieving a better potential so that she has more energy at the end of the day. She's more contributing to the family. I've had people who haven't been able to get out of their house because of poor health. And now they're traveling all over the world and reaching their potential with what they can do because they changed their diet. It's something simple.
It is. It is. And the encouragement coming from you and from other practitioners who really feel that the role of nutrition is key. It's really the beginning step. You know, people are always like, oh, Band-Aid, Band-Aid, give me a drug for that. I had one patient once say to me, I don't have time for this. Can't you just give me something? Well, I think we need to work on it a little bit better, or else it's just going to probably come back. You know, we talked about autoantibodies, but we're also aware that a lot of our illnesses stem from inflammation. So, you know, offhand, people don't realize that things like heart disease, like you know, cholesterol issues, you know, those type of things are inflammatory, fatty liver. And those things can really be improved with diet.
We do have recommendations from the American Heart Association, but even those have become dated. And we need to update things from our new food supply. And we have things arriving all of the time. Nutrition is exploding in possibility. There are things in the grocery stores that were never there before that are actually great to eat. I'm recommending these baby food pouches where they're basically smoothies to go, and they're organic, 2 vegetables and a fruit, and it can be a nice little snack. If you always carry food with you, you're less vulnerable to the environment, and you can follow through with your plans of eating better because you already have your lunch with you. Why wait in line for something else? You can bring your own better tasting lunch. It's just, it starts to work, and people follow it because it does work. It fits in their busy lifestyles.
Yeah, people just need those tricks. And I'm thinking to myself, one of the things that is probably the worst thing you could do is go to the grocery store hungry.
Unless you're going to a really expensive grocery store where the options are really, so when I go to Whole Foods, I'm in big trouble. It's
You are.
like it's a candy person walking into a candy store. We got to be really careful about when we go to the grocery store. Yeah.
Right. You know, kind of making that list and kind of sticking to it probably is more helpful. But, you know, my husband and I were having a conversation. He said, you know, I didn't know that there were so many different types of cheeses growing up. I thought the only thing that was out there was Velveeta. How horrible is that? And then truly growing up, I don't think I ever saw an avocado.
Right. And now we have these foods available, like the aged cheeses can be beneficial. You don't want to have too much of them. They are a source of saturated fat. We talked a little bit about fatty acids. So the difference between the fat in an avocado and the fat in cheese is that the fat in the avocado is monounsaturated fat. It's like olive oil, and it carries with it a lot of other micronutrients that can be very beneficial to health. So an avocado is almost a perfect food. It doesn't contain a heck of a lot of protein, but it goes so well with other foods that do. Cheese, on the other hand, we need to limit a little bit because of the saturated fat in the body will be in competition to the beneficial fats. So if you have too much of cheese or fatty meats or even dairy with the saturated fat, you won't have as much of the anti-inflammatory effect of the foods with the beneficial fats, like avocado, like nuts and seeds. Fish is another great source of the omega-3s. And someone in the back of my head is saying, well, what about the mercury? Wild caught, what do we do about that? And you can get some of this wild caught on sale and even in packets that you rip open, you know, and can carry with you. Seaweed is a way to deal with heavy metals.
Ooh, all right.
Seaweed,
What is there another name for seaweed? Or
it
do you
can,
have to go to the shore and, scrape it up out of the water?
no, you can buy it. It's nori. It's actually fairly cheap. It's what they wrap sushi with. So it's kind of a nice little combination there. And it's also good for things like lead poisoning. And so now the folks in Newark, New Jersey are having trouble with their water. They should all be eating a lot of seaweed, especially kids. How do we do it in a way that the flavor doesn't get you? You can take a piece of something called kombu, Kombu, and you can put it into the cooking water in your Instapot or your crock pot or your beans, and it's like a bay leaf, and you can remove it. You don't have to eat it. But it helps digestibility of the foods that you're cooking, as well as imparts that wisdom or binding for the heavy metals.
Wow. Tell us the kind of list of fatty meat. I think that people just have to hear it to try to remember it. What's fatty? What's not so fat?
They're trying to grow their animals leaner by how they feed them. But essentially the red meats are the fattier meats. The skin of the chicken or the turkey is where the saturated fat can occur. Pork, there are certain cuts of pork that are better than others. And again, I would be careful of pork.
Because
because they're more GMO. They grow the animals with GMOs as well. Buffalo is a better meat. Wild game can be a better bet.
like elk?
Like elk, right? And you can even get elk jerky, buffalo jerky.
See, you know what? I don't know. We're from the same area. We're from Western Mass, and
Yeah.
there's Costco's, and maybe I think there's Costco's everywhere. But I'll tell you, if Costco would promote on that Saturday at noontime their little booths with all these different things, people would try it and then they would buy it.
Yes.
Because you don't want to buy a whole thing. Like you talk to people about, listen, let's get you off the dairy. Let's get you onto cashew milk or almond milk or even coconut milk. And they're like, I don't want to try it. But you know what? If the grocery store had opened up a carton, for a nutritional benefit, let people have little cups of it. It's kind of like going to the liquor store on a Saturday, because that's when everybody's having fun, and they do, the sample of the wines. What they're expecting is that you're going to buy it because you've tasted it and you like it. So if we could get together and try these things, maybe people would want to purchase it, especially with the kids. If you kind of don't get into it, ooh, this is jerky, and don't get into, they're like, what's jerky? Oh, taste it. You'll love it.
Yeah, that's true. Right. And there are oat milks now that are really tasty.
Oat milks. Yes.
Ah.
Are they all gluten-free? Because people want to know.
Huh.
See, that's the thing that I understand, is that if it doesn't say gluten-free, oat can be produced in the same factory. I don't want to say factory, but the same environment.
Yeah, so the fields, like we have an oat field and then we got a wheat field, and they can cross-pollinate. So that's where the gluten can come in. So oats by themselves do not naturally contain gluten. So this speaks to people who feel that they need to avoid gluten. Let's say that, but I've come to realize over many years that it may actually not be the gluten that is the problem. So celiac disease, yes, gluten is the problem. But for those who are intolerant, it may actually be the wheat or the corn. Truthfully, corn is gluten-free and not gluten.
But it's all GMO for the most part.
Maybe the GMO problem.
Right, right,
problem.
right. Hey, you know what? I learned this recently, did a quick talk with Dr. Tom O'Brien, who's the head of autoimmunity, you know, the guru, et cetera. And he talks about healing your brain. And he was talking about our bodies having too much aluminum in it. And we talk a lot about antiperspirants and how they're probably not good because you're going to get a lot of aluminum that way. And aluminum also goes into, you know, increased risk for dementia and all that kind of stuff. So we talked about pulling aluminum out of your system with mineral water high in silica. And he was adding beet powder into it with a, you know, having a nice, it's almost like a smoothie kind of, you know, but it's more liquid version. Are you familiar with how to get rid of, you were talking about heavy metals, et cetera, but getting rid of this aluminum with the silica in the mineral water?
Okay, so I think mineral water is a great idea. The first thing that comes to mind is don't get too much of the micro minerals because they can accumulate and actually build up. And so he's talking about a therapeutic use where it's like taking a dose. And so my worry is always somebody saying a little is good, a lot must be better. Maybe I should go out and buy some silica. Horsetail is a plant that is naturally high in silica. And so there is something to what he's talking about, but I just worry about going overboard. So listen to it, follow it, be careful.
Right, right.
Beets are a great plant. That's where milk thistle comes from. Yeah.
It does?
Yeah.
Do you know that if you go into the emergency room with an overdose of acetaminophen or Tylenol, that's like the first thing they give to protect the liver? Is milk thistle.
Oh, milk thistle. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of the GI supplements that I use to really help promote healing, more or less. You know, we use one of the products from Pure Encapsulation called DGL Plus, and it has the milk thistle, it has the licorice, it has the marshmallow root. All of these are healing herbs. You know, I'm hard pressed. I know these facts because I've learned from people who have learned from people, and these things have been around forever. But some people rely on show me the research, show me the research. And it's hard to offer a lot of that research. Do you ever find that when you're promoting something that's herbal, Chinese herbs, or, you know, general plants, et cetera, that you have kind of a pushback from people?
And I understand that pushback because people want to feel safe. NIH does not and has not been funding. Oh, sorry, I've got something I need to get rid of.
You're fine. I don't hear anything. I don't see anything.
Okay, so NIH hasn't been funding studies having to do with anything plant-based. So dietary studies are not well funded. And aside from that, the NIH has had a lot of cutbacks in the current political system. So evidence. It is out there. There are people who are doing the studies, but it takes a little bit of a deeper digging. And so I sort of have a body of literature to support what I'm doing in my research. I'm happy to share that with anybody who's interested. I wish I had more time sometimes to respond to all of this, but going to PubMed may be a good place for folks. But there's a certain amount of trust as well. And what's the research behind it's okay what you're doing now? If you keep doing it, you'll probably keep feeling the way that you're feeling.
Right. I think, what's that thing? If you keep banging your head against the wall and getting a headache, and then you don't stop banging against the wall with your head, you're going to continue with the headache. So it's time to make a change.
That's right. That's right.
Change good is good. Change can be your friend, but the fear of change, the fear of putting, you know, kind of your eggs in one basket, Organic eggs, that is. But you know, that type of thing, it's hard to talk to people because they are a product of their past. And because they grew up that way, they feel, well, their parents knew enough. And, you know, it really is, if you have more of that support with your network, your friends, your family, whatnot, you're more likely to stay with that change. Now, you know, I mean, some people will say, well, does that mean I never can have a hot dog again? Well, no. I mean, if you enjoy a hot dog, there's probably better hot dogs than others, but you know, if your microbiome is really healthy and you go to Fenway to watch a, you know, baseball game and you want one of their hot dogs, yeah, have a hot dog, but just don't say I'm going to have a hot dog every single night for the next month.
That's true. That's true. Although Tufts did do a study with hot dogs that I probably don't want to get into, that even one hot dog can be really horrible when it comes to cancer. But in general, what we recommend is 80% compliance to a healthy diet. And then having what you want every once in a while, because once you build up your resilience, that's what it is. You can resist colds and flus and viruses and terrible things happening when you have that healthy foundation. So in the beginning, it's very useful to be more compliant, but once you've got the foundations, you should be good for going off of it every once in a while. It can be a really bad food too, but you'll be okay because you've got what it takes to heal from whatever damage may be done.
Right. Lowering your total inflammation in your body does improve your immunity because 70% of your immunity comes within the gut.
This is true. Yeah.
Right. So, you know, you have a healthy gut. And there's so many issues that people might not realize that are associated with the gut. And I'm going to just mention a few. One are gas and bloating and belching all the time and having a bowel movement that floats on the toilet, or being constipated, or having constipation and diarrhea alternating, and belly cramps and poor skin and insomnia. You know, it's a rabbit hole. You know, sometimes my daughter and I say, okay, let's kind of stay more, you know, one step at a time. But I have to say it moves people into different directions based on what's going on. But again, it all goes back. Let's try to heal the gut. Let's try to, and you do, like you said, people get better, or they may not feel that great in a very short period of time. It's usually a marathon, not a sprint, but you have to decide you're going to do it and do it, because if you just nilly-willy it, it's not going to work in the beginning.
So I learn a lot from my students, and hopefully they'll learn a few things from me, but I'm working with medical students and they are studying all the time. They call it like drinking from a fire hose. So when it comes to eating well, we can improve cognition and learning ability. And that can be key. We can also improve energy, and energy is something we can always use more of. There are certain foods that are going to just put us to sleep and make the brain foggy. Usually they're high in sugars and refined carbohydrates. And so cutting that out and replacing it with something that's really got some nutritious base to it can give you what you need and the edge to accomplish your goals. And so sometimes what you need is a motivating factor, like, okay, I've got an exam, I'm going to do it. It may not be there's anything wrong with my gut. Maybe you feel that there isn't anything wrong with your gut, but you're going to do it for other reasons.
So let's talk about improving the microbiome outside of just your food. People often ask, should I take a probiotic? Should I eat kimchi? What do you think about that?
Okay, so those are both excellent ideas and should be customized to the individual. We need to be careful about supplements, make sure that they have what they say they have in them. When it comes to probiotics, I generally recommend a diverse probiotic, with one exception that I'll get into. So that means several different strains. It's not necessarily the quantity, but the like 30 different strains of something. And then you can go for the quantity of 30 billion or 100 billion. And because we don't know which of them the individual really needs, we're not there yet with our research to know what individuals may or may not be lacking. So just adding on acidophilus may not be what's lacking for you. Kimchi is a great example of a fermented food that naturally grows its own beneficial bacteria. Sauerkraut, kefir, yogurt, miso, those are all good fermented foods, as well as something that we might can. The beets you mentioned before. Saccharomyces Boulardii is a commensal yeast, S. boulardii, that can help to repair leaky gut. Leaky gut is where the junction proteins in the villi of the intestines.
Are you putting a curse on me, waving those?
Start to come apart, and then substance leak into systemic circulations that are irritating. And so S. boulardii comes in. There's a couple of different brands. Claire Labs, Klaire, they do a lot of research and they can be counted on. Florastore is another one. And so this is one that isn't a biotic. It's not a bacteria. And so if someone has to go on antibiotics to treat Lyme disease, for instance,
exactly,
the disease is worse than the antibiotic, then you want to be taking the S. boulardii at the time you're going through the antibiotic treatment. And then after you're finished with the antibiotic treatment is when you throw in the probiotics complementing the S. boulardii. You throw in the diversity and you eat foods that are helping your good guys to come back again. It's like a garden. If I just rototill my garden and sit back in my lawn chair, I'm going to get grass and weeds in my garden, not the tomatoes that I'm looking for. We need to plant the gardens after, plant the gut after antibiotics. And so that's another little pearl that I'd like to pass along to your group in particular.
Right,
like,
right.
I need to do this. The disease is worse.
Right, right. But you don't want to have such horrible repercussions after your treatment.
Right.
That's why one of the things that I do like is to add on or treat independently for Lyme disease, Japanese knotweed and cat's claw, because that's not going to disrupt your microbiome. The new thing on the front, it's probably not totally new, but Spore Probiotics. How do you feel about them? Have you utilized them?
I have to some extent, but I need to learn more about it. This is like, okay, we used to go digging in the dirt.
I know. Get dirty hands and then bite your nail.
As kids, and maybe you didn't clean your vegetables well enough. Now we hesitate, and for good reason, because the soil has changed so much. So the soil has its own biome, and utilizing the soil biome can be a part of the missing pieces. Absolutely. But I don't know enough about it to recommend particular spores or a colony of spores. I suspect it's similar to what I see in the probiotics, that it's a group that's probably better than particular singular organisms.
Right. Microbiome labs.
Yeah.
Is the kind of the newer kids on the block.
Okay.
I just think diversity, and what I was recommended at one point is to alternate probiotics. If you can't find everything in one place and you really need to figure things out, you can alternate different strains.
You can alternate the strains, you can combine them.
Yes. Some people will take probiotics and they'll get really, really uncomfortable. They'll get gassy. And then they just stop.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Well, I'm glad I did then too.
That is actually a good sign that it's exactly what you need. It shouldn't be so uncomfortable that, you're bowled over in pain. But essentially, for the folks who are really out of balance, in the first 2 to 3 days of taking a probiotic, you want to start with like a half a dose and just kind of coach your body back into balance. These effects shouldn't last more than 3 or 4 days, but you got to hang in there. A lot of water, not eating sugar or refined carbohydrates, which tend to feed the bad guys. So the bad guys are dying off. They send signals to the brain. The individual gets cravings. These cravings can be really intense. Like, okay, I just had a meal. I'm not hungry and I'm dying for sugar. And that can last for up to 3 months. That
What?
effect.
Say it isn't so. That's really rough.
It's like giving up a cigarette. You don't need cigarettes, but you feel like you do. You don't need sugar, but you feel like you do. And so the first 3 days, if you go cold turkey or hardest, 3 days, 2 weeks, at 6 weeks, you really got it down. You have a little, you're right back there. You get the cravings again, but it's not as hard to get back on track. So I usually say, yeah, go ahead and have sugar at 6 weeks just to experience that. So they know, because once you're off of it, you can have it every once in a while and it won't do that to you. But it takes up to 3 weeks to get that foundation in effect.
Right. And because sugar is really, we're talking about the sweets. We're talking about a candy bar. We're talking about a regular soda. We're talking about baked goods, that big thick frosting on that birthday cake. Those are the things. One of the things that's very hard for people to give up, and it's not just for summertime, it's all year long, is ice cream.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any suggestions?
Okay. So aside from, so let's say we've got somebody who's eating healthy all the time and they go out for some really good quality ice cream. We're not talking about those. We're talking about people who are like buying pints of it and putting it into the freezer. For them, I would say, the other, aside from your Instapot or crock pot, get a really good blender. Take some bananas, let them ripen, peel them, throw them into a freezer bag, and put them into the freezer for when you're ready. That and other frozen fruit, put them into the blender, add a little vanilla, some nice raw honey, because the bees put a substance into the hive that's antibacterial. So the raw honey, organic honey, local, even better for your allergies, is really good for you. And you can come up with concoctions that are phenomenal. And I swear they can beat what you got down the street for ice cream.
Wow. Have you done avocado mousse?
Oh, yes, I have.
Isn't that amazing?
So good. Yes. And we have some recipes on the website that folks can go to at
Wow. And the website is the
www.umassmed.edu/nutrition.
Okay.
Go under IBD and there's huge amount of recipes there.
Oh, I love that. It's nice to give back, and you are where you are because that's where you were meant to be. And I really feel that a lot of experts in the area of nutrition or healing or any of these kind of, alternative ways, I think they get there because they have that personal experience that motivates and drives them to say, hey, you know what? I need to help other people because I know, and that's sometimes really good. Like people will say to me, about their fatigue or whatever, and they know that I experienced that. So they know that I know. And, that fatigue component is the number one reason why people go to their primary care doctor. And, sometimes the answers are not what we feel are correct, and that could be a whole nother podcast, but nonetheless, it's important to really start with your diet, learn, give yourself some time. Are you going to change overnight? No, it's the baby steps.
Yes, it is. And so here I'm not a potter anymore. Maybe when I retire, but I have such a rewarding career because I'm helping people and because the diet works.
Yeah, you do. If you believe in what you do, then you exude that confidence that people can grab onto. And especially if you support people, if you're one and done and you don't talk to them again, then that's not helpful. That's why I love the platform that we utilize, because there's a chat function. People can just go on. It's HIPAA compliant. They can just type us a little note like, this is what I did yesterday. Is this okay? Or, I didn't order this. Do I really need that? Because they have a question and, it's easy. Then we hop on and we answer it. And it's convenient. And they do feel that there's a good connection. So Barbara, what a wonderful podcast, and I have people that are so cute. They'll write into me, I'm addicted to your podcast. And I'm like, well, that's kind of cute.
Cindy, thank you so much for what you do and for spreading the word and for helping people.
Thank you. Thank you. And we do have, a lot of listeners. Last look, there was like 34 countries where people listen. One person in Japan, but whatever. They were probably there visiting someone, but that's okay. That's okay. And a lot of locals here in the Massachusetts area. I get a little statistics: Chicopee, West Springfield, Wilbraham, East Longmeadow, Munson is a big one. Of course, that's where ticks are. But you know what? Yeah. What's real important here is it's not just about the tick bite. This is all about health and maintaining your health and being healthier and probably helping you prevent illness down the long road there.
I've had Lyme disease, and it was the worst illness I have ever had.
Lyme is like cancer. You probably can't talk to anyone who has not been affected, a family member, a friend, someone who's an acquaintance. It's awful. And, people like you and I, we do understand. So again, thank you, Barbara. It's been a pleasure. And I do want to keep in touch with you and keep letting me know what's new on the horizon. It's always nice to support people who are doing research that's going to help us all.
Thank you, Cindy. I really appreciate the time.
Oh, that's awesome. For everybody who has been listening and our avid listeners, please subscribe to the podcast series at www.livingwithlyme.us. If you are on my subscriber list, you help me get funding to keep this going. So I need my numbers up. Please take the time, www.livingwithlyme.us. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to helping everyone out there with all of this great news. Take care, everybody.